The stars disappeared one by one. At first, the astronomers thought it was some kind of error in their equipment. Then the satellites confirmed what no one wanted to believe. Something massive was blocking the light from space. Something was coming. Admiral stood on the observation deck of the United Earth Defense Station, watching the darkness grow. She was 43 years old, with sharp eyes and a calm face that never showed fear. She had spent 20 years preparing for threats that might come from beyond their world. Now that threat was here, and it was bigger than anything she had imagined. "How many ships?" she asked quietly. Commander Minu checked his display screen. His hands were shaking slightly. Over 3,000 confirmed, possibly more hiding behind the main fleet. 3,000 ships. Earth had exactly 247 military vessels capable of space combat. The math was simple and terrifying. The alien fleet stopped just beyond the moon's orbit. For 6 hours they did nothing. They just waited, letting humanity stare at their impossible numbers. It was a message without words. Look at what we are. Look at what you are not. Then the transmission came. Every screen on Earth displayed the same image. A tall creature stood in what looked like a throne room made of black metal. It had 4 arms, skin that looked like dark polished stone, and eyes that glowed with pale blue light. When it spoke, the translation came instantly, as if they had already learned every human language. "I am High Commander of the Empire. We have claimed 17 star systems. No species has ever refused our offer. No species has ever survived refusing." Watch the alien's face. There was no anger in its expression, no cruelty, just absolute certainty. This creature had never known defeat. It could not even imagine it. "Your planet and your species now belong to the Empire," continued. "You will disarm all military forces. You will present your leaders for re-education. Your population will serve the Empire in whatever way we require. You have 72 hours to accept these terms. If you refuse, your cities will burn and your species will end." The transmission ended. The screens went dark. Closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, her expression had not changed. "Get me a line to the Council, now." The United Earth Council met within the hour. Representatives from every nation gathered in the Great Hall beneath the Alps, the most secure location on the planet. Some had flown through the night. Others joined through video screens, their faces pale with fear. President of the United Korean Republic sat at the head of the table. She was young for her position, only 38, but she had been elected because people trusted her to make hard decisions. Now she faced the hardest decision any human had ever made. "We have heard the terms," she said. "We have seen their fleet. I want every option on this table, every single one." Foreign Minister spoke first. She was known for finding peaceful solutions to impossible problems. "We could negotiate, ask for better terms. Perhaps they would allow us some form of self-governance." "They conquered 17 systems," General interrupted. He was the oldest person in the room, with white hair and a face full of scars from old wars. "Did any of those species negotiate better terms?" "We don't know that. We know they all submitted. We know none of them are free," stood slowly, his old bones protesting. "I have fought wars my entire life. I have seen what happens to people who surrender to enemies like this. They don't become servants, they become property. Their children become property. They forget they were ever anything else." The room fell silent. Defense Secretary pulled up a display showing their military assets. "If we fight, we lose. Their fleet is over 10 times larger than anything we can put together. Their technology is at least 2 centuries ahead of ours. We would be throwing lives away." "And if we surrender?" President asked. "Then we lose slowly instead of quickly, but we still lose." Admiral had been silent until now. She stood and walked to the window, looking up at the sky where the enemy fleet waited. "I want to tell you all something," she said. "When I was a child, my grandmother told me about the occupation, how our people lived under foreign rule for decades, how they were told their language was inferior, their culture was worthless, their only purpose was to serve their masters. She turned back to face the council. She told me about the resistance, the people who fought even when fighting seemed hopeless, the ones who died so that their children might have a chance to be free. She asked me to promise that I would never let that happen again, that I would fight, no matter the odds. "Admiral, this is different," Foreign Minister said gently. "This isn't one nation against another. This is our entire species against an empire that spans the stars." "Yes," agreed. "It is different. The stakes are higher, but the choice is the same. We can kneel and hope our masters are kind, or we can stand and fight for the right to determine our own future." General nodded slowly. "If we surrender, we might survive for a time, but we won't be human anymore. We'll be whatever they want us to be. Is that survival, or is it just a slower kind of death?" President looked around the room. She saw fear in every face, but she also saw something else, something that had carried humanity through ice ages and plagues and wars and disasters, something that refused to accept defeat. "We vote," she said, "all in favor of accepting the terms." Not a single hand rose. "All in favor of resistance." Every hand went up. Some trembled, some were steady, but they all rose. President took a deep breath. "Then we fight. Admiral, you have command of all Earth Defense Forces. General, I want a war strategy on my desk within 12 hours. Everyone else, prepare your people. This will be the hardest thing our species has ever done." The message to the was broadcast 6 hours later. President delivered it herself, standing in front of the council hall with the flags of every nation behind her. "High Commander, we have received your terms. We have considered them carefully, and we have decided that humanity will never submit to slavery. Not today, not ever. If you want our world, you will have to take it from us. And we promise you this, we will make you pay for every inch in blood." She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was iron. "You asked us to kneel. Here is our answer, come and take." On the bridge of his flagship, High Commander watched the transmission with something he had not felt in centuries: confusion. No species had ever refused. They always saw reason. They always chose survival. "What do you command?" his second officer asked. His 4 hands clenched into fists. "We show them what happens to those who defy the Empire. Prepare the fleet for assault. We will burn their defiance out of them." But deep in his ancient mind, a small voice whispered something uncomfortable. These creatures were either very brave or very foolish, and he was not entirely sure which possibility worried him more. The expected chaos. They expected humans to run, to hide, to die in desperate and useless attacks against their superior ships. They expected the war to last perhaps 3 days, maybe a week if the humans were especially stubborn. They were wrong. Captain sat in the command chair of the stealth frigate Silent Wind. Her ship was tiny compared to the massive dreadnoughts. It was painted black and covered with special materials that absorbed sensor signals. To the enemy's detection systems, her ship looked like empty space. "Target acquired," her weapons officer whispered. Even though the enemy could not hear them, everyone on the ship spoke quietly. It felt right somehow. On the screen, a supply convoy moved through the darkness between Earth and Mars. 12 cargo ships carrying fuel and ammunition for the main fleet. They were protected by 2 destroyer escorts, but the destroyers were looking outward, watching for threats from a distance. They never considered that death might already be among them. "Fire," said calmly. The Silent Wind launched 6 missiles. They traveled without engine flames, using only small bursts of compressed gas to adjust their course. Cold, silent, invisible. By the time they detected them, it was too late. The first cargo ship exploded, then the second, then the third. The destroyers spun around, weapons searching for targets, but the Silent Wind was already gone. She had fired and moved immediately, disappearing into the endless black. "Supply convoy eliminated," reported to command. "No casualties on our side, returning to hidden position." Across the solar system, similar attacks were happening. Humanity had spent thousands of years learning how to kill. They had developed weapons that could level cities and poisons that could end millions of lives. They had created spies and assassins, and special forces trained to strike from shadows. Now they turned all of that terrible knowledge against an enemy from the stars. On the command ship, Fleet Commander stared at the reports with growing unease. In 3 days he had lost 47 ships, not to great battles but to small strikes, hit-and-run attacks, ambushes. His fuel supplies were running low. His communication relays kept disappearing. His scouts never returned. "This is not how inferior species fight," his tactical officer said nervously. "They should be defending their cities, making last stands, dying with honor. Instead they fight like parasites, like shadows." "Find them," ordered. "I don't care how many ships it takes. Find these cowards and destroy them." But finding the human ships proved impossible. They were too small, too fast, too clever. Every time the thought they had cornered one, it would vanish and appear somewhere else. It was like fighting smoke. Meanwhile, on Luna Base, Doctor worked without sleep. She was the lead scientist of Earth's Emergency Technology Division, and she had been given a gift. During one of the ambushes, a human destroyer had managed to disable a scout ship before it self-destructed. From the wreckage, they had recovered fragments of the alien shield generator. Studied the alien device with hungry eyes. The technology was advanced, yes, but it was also old. They had used the same shield design for centuries because it always worked. They had never needed to improve it. Humans were different. Humans were never satisfied. "Look at this," she told her assistant, a young engineer named. "Their shields absorb energy attacks by spreading the impact across the entire field. Very efficient, very stable." "Can we copy it?" asked. Smiled. It was not a friendly smile. "We can do better. Their shields spread energy evenly because they value stability. But what if we create a shield that concentrates energy at the point of impact? It would be unstable, yes, dangerous, but it would be stronger at the moment it matters most. That would require a completely new power system." Then we build a new power system. Within 48 hours, they had a working prototype. Within 72 hours, the first human ship was equipped with shields that could match weapons. The aliens had taken centuries to develop their technology. Humans did it in 3 days. High Commander received the news of the first major defeat with cold fury. A human battle group had attacked a patrol near Jupiter. The patrol had been larger, better armed, and should have won easily. Instead, the human ships had taken hits that should have destroyed them and kept fighting. Their shields were different somehow. Stronger. "Impossible," said. "They captured our technology 3 days ago. No species can reverse engineer shields in 3 days." "The evidence is clear, High Commander. The humans have adapted our technology, perhaps even improved it." Was silent for a long moment. For the first time since the invasion began, he felt something cold in his chest. Not fear exactly. He did not know how to feel fear, but something close to it. On Earth, General watched the battle reports with grim satisfaction. They were still badly outnumbered. They were still likely to lose, but they were hurting the enemy. They were making the bleed. "The key to this war is time," he told his officers. "Every day we survive, we get stronger. We learn more about their technology. We find new ways to fight. They expected us to die quickly. Instead, we will make this war long and painful." Admiral nodded. "What about their morale? They have never faced real resistance before." "Exactly. Their soldiers don't know how to handle setbacks. Their commanders have never lost ships. Every victory we win, no matter how small, shakes their confidence. We are teaching them something they have never learned before." What's that? His old eyes were hard. Fear. They launched their first major assault 2 weeks after the ultimatum. 50 dreadnoughts moved toward Earth, their weapons charged and ready. They expected to overwhelm the human defenders through sheer firepower. Captain was waiting for them. The Silent Wind and her sister ships had spent days placing mines along the expected approach routes. Not ordinary mines, but special weapons designed by Doctor's team. When the fleet entered the kill zone, the mines activated. They did not explode. Instead, they released clouds of microscopic machines that attached themselves to the alien ships. The machines did nothing at first. They just waited, crawling through power systems and weapon circuits, learning how everything worked. Then, at a signal from ship, they all activated at once. Across the attack fleet, weapons systems failed. Shield generators overloaded. Navigation computers gave wrong information. Engines fired in random directions. 50 dreadnoughts became 50 helpless targets drifting in space. Admiral's defense fleet struck like a hammer. Missiles and energy weapons poured into the confused enemy. Ships that had threatened to destroy cities exploded one after another. Within 2 hours, the assault was broken. The surviving ships retreated in disorder. Humanity had won its first real battle. The cost was high. 12 human ships destroyed, thousands of lives lost, but they had proved something important. They could be beaten. On the command ship, Fleet Commander stood among the ashes of his pride. He had lost 23 dreadnoughts in a single battle to a species he had dismissed as primitives. How, he whispered, how did they do this? No one had an answer. Far away on Earth, people who had spent weeks in fear finally allowed themselves to hope. The enemy was not invincible. The darkness could be pushed back. Admiral addressed the planet that night, her voice calm and steady. Today we proved that we can fight. Tomorrow we will prove that we can win. This war is far from over, but we will not give up. We will never give up, because we are human and humans do not kneel. The stars were still dark with enemy ships, but for the first time, humanity looked up at them without despair. They looked up with determination, with fire, with the promise that every inch of space would cost the invaders dearly. The war had truly begun. High Commander had learned from his mistakes. He would not underestimate the humans again. He would not send his ships into ambushes or allow small attacks to weaken his forces. Instead, he would force the humans to fight on his terms. Mars Colony was home to 3 million people. It was humanity's largest settlement beyond Earth, a city of domes and underground tunnels built over decades of hard work. Children had been born there who had never seen Earth's blue sky. It was more than a colony. It was hope for humanity's future among the stars. Surrounded it with 200 ships. Your fleet will come to save these people, he told his officers. They must come, and when they do, we will destroy them in open battle. No ambushes, no tricks, just pure military power against their pathetic resistance. The message to Earth was simple. Surrender your fleet or watch 3 million people die. Admiral received the ultimatum on the bridge of the indomitable Earth's largest warship. She read it twice, her face showing nothing. Then she turned to her communications officer. Get me General. The old general's face appeared on her screen. He looked tired. They were all tired, but his eyes were still sharp. You know it's a trap, he said. Yes. And you're going anyway. 3 million people, General, children, families, scientists working to give humanity a future. I cannot abandon them. Nodded slowly. I wouldn't want you to. I'm just making sure you understand what you're facing. I do, his voice was steady. But I also know something doesn't. He thinks this trap will break us. Instead, we will break him. The human fleet gathered. 153 ships, everything Earth could spare without leaving the home planet defenseless. It was still smaller than the force around Mars, but these were battle-hardened crews now. They had fought the enemy. They had tasted victory. They were not afraid anymore. Lieutenant checked his fighter one last time. He was 26 years old, with quick hands and quicker reflexes. Before the war, he had been a racing pilot, flying small ships through dangerous courses for sport. Now he flew combat missions against alien warships. His squadron leader, Captain, gathered the pilots together before launch. She was a serious woman who rarely smiled, but her people trusted her completely. "Our mission is simple," she told them. "The fleet will engage the enemy head-on. While they're focused on the big ships, we slip through. Our target is the enemy flagship. We deliver a special package to its reactor core." "What kind of package?" one of the younger pilots asked. Held up a small device. It looked almost harmless. "Doctor's latest gift. When this reaches the flagship's reactor, it will create an overload that can't be stopped. The explosion should disable several nearby ships as well." Should asked. Should almost smiled. "Nothing is certain in war. That's why we have 40 pilots going in. If even one of us reaches the target, we win." Looked around at his fellow pilots. They were young, most of them. Some had been students a year ago. Some had never expected to fight in any war, let alone one for the survival of their species. But they all nodded. They all understood. "Then let's make it count," he said. The Battle of Mars began at exactly 600 Earth time. The human fleet jumped into the system and immediately opened fire. Ships returned fire, their weapons lighting up the darkness like angry stars. Space became a hell of explosions and energy beams. Admiral commanded from the Indomitable, directing her ships with calm precision. The new shields held against the enemy weapons, but they couldn't hold forever. Ships were taking damage. Ships were dying. "Focus fire on their left flank," she ordered. "Make them think we're trying to break through there." It was a trick. While they concentrated on defending their left side, fighter squadron slipped around the right. 40 small ships, moving fast and low, trying to reach the flagship at the center of the enemy formation. They detected them too late. Defense turrets opened fire, filling space with deadly energy. Fighters exploded. Pilots died, but the survivors kept going. Flew like he had never flown before. His hands moved without thought, dodging fire by instinct alone. Beside him, his wingman took a direct hit and vanished in a ball of flame. He didn't have time to mourn. He just kept flying. 12 ships left," his voice came through the radio. "She was still alive. Keep going, we're almost there." The flagship loomed ahead, a massive thing bristling with weapons. Its shields flickered as the human fleet pounded it from a distance, but they were still strong enough to stop any missile or energy blast. They were not strong enough to stop a fighter flying at full speed. 7 ships left. I'm hit bad." That was Pilot, his voice cut off suddenly. 6 ships. 5. Watched his squadron die around him. Each flash of light was a friend, a comrade, a person who would never go home. His hands tightened on the controls. 3 ships left, reported. "I'm going in, you're right behind me." She didn't make it. A defensive turret caught her ship just meters from the shield barrier. The explosion was bright and brief. 2 ships, whispered. Then he saw the other survivor take a hit. 1 ship. Just him, just one pilot left, carrying the weapon that could turn the battle. The flagship's guns turned toward him. He could see the turrets tracking, calculating, preparing to fire. In 2 seconds, he would be dead. He pushed his fighter to maximum speed. The engine screamed. The hull groaned. This was beyond what the ship was designed for. It would tear itself apart even if the enemy didn't destroy it. But he only needed to survive for 2 more seconds. The shield barrier hit him like a solid wall, but his momentum carried him through. Inside the shield, the flagship's hull stretched out before him. He could see the reactor housing, exactly where intelligence had said it would be. "For everyone who couldn't run," he said softly. He released the weapon and pulled up hard. His fighter clipped the hull, spinning wildly. Warning lights screamed. His vision went red, then black. The weapon penetrated the reactor housing. Doctor's device activated. For 1 millisecond, the reactor tried to contain the energy surge. Then it failed. The flagship exploded. The blast was enormous. 3 nearby cruisers were caught in the shockwave, their shields collapsing, their hulls tearing apart. The entire formation shuddered as their command ship died in nuclear fire. On the Indomitable, Admiral allowed herself one moment of fierce joy. Then she was back to work. All ships press the attack, they've lost their command, they're confused, hit them now. The human fleet charged forward. Without their flagship, without their high commander's orders, they fell into disorder. Some ships tried to retreat, some tried to fight. They got in each other's way. For 6 more hours, the battle raged. But the outcome was decided the moment the flagship died. When the last ship finally fled the system, the space around Mars was filled with wreckage from both sides. Mars was saved. 3 million people looked up at the sky and wept with relief. But the cost was terrible. 47 human ships destroyed, thousands of lives lost. His body was never found. His fighter had disintegrated in the explosion, taking him with it. Admiral stood on her damaged bridge, looking at the casualty reports. So many names. So many empty chairs in mess halls, empty bunks in crew quarters, empty places at family tables. Was it worth it? Her first officer asked quietly. Thought about the 3 million people on Mars, the children who would grow up, the scientists who would keep working, the future that still had a chance. Yes, she said, it was worth it. It has to be worth it. Because if we start thinking their sacrifice was meaningless, we lose the will to keep fighting, and we cannot afford that. She straightened her uniform and turned to face her crew. Send a message to Earth. Tell them Mars is secure. Tell them we won. And tell them to prepare for what comes next. This war is far from over. Across the solar system, humanity celebrated their victory. But they also mourned their dead. And they prepared for the long fight ahead, knowing that the hardest battles were still to come. 2 years had passed since the ultimatum. 2 years of blood and fire and endless fighting. They had not surrendered. They had retreated from the solar system, yes, but they had not given up. Instead, they had brought more ships, more soldiers, more weapons. The war had spread beyond Earth's home system to the stars themselves. Humanity had changed. Every city had become a fortress. Every factory produced weapons. Every school taught children how to survive, how to fight, how to never give up. The comfortable world of the past was gone. In its place was a civilization built for war. Sargent crouched in the mud of 442b, a jungle world 300 light-years from Earth. They had used this planet as a staging ground for their attacks on human colony ships. Now and her squad were here to make them pay for it. The rain fell constantly, warm and heavy. The trees were not like Earth trees. They were purple and red, with leaves that could cut skin and roots that moved on their own. Everything on this planet seemed designed to kill humans. And yet humans were here, fighting, surviving. Contact ahead, Private whispered. He was the youngest member of the squad, only 19. He had lied about his age to join the military. So many young people had. Raised her hand, signaling everyone to stop. Through the rain, she could see the outline of a patrol. 5 soldiers, heavily armed, moving through the jungle with the confidence of creatures who believed they owned everything they touched. They did not know she was there. That was their first mistake. Their last mistake was walking into her kill zone. Fire, she said calmly. The ambush was over in seconds. Human weapons had improved dramatically since the war began. What once took multiple shots to kill a soldier now took only one. The 5 aliens fell without even understanding what had hit them. Move, ordered. They'll send more when this patrol doesn't report. They had been on this planet for 3 weeks. 50 soldiers had landed. 31 remained. They were outnumbered by at least 50 to 1, surrounded by enemies, with no hope of rescue for another month. By normal military thinking, they should have surrendered or died. But these were not normal soldiers. These were humans. They fought during the day and moved at night. They set traps using local plants and captured enemy weapons. They turned the jungle itself into a weapon, learning which creatures were poisonous, which plants could be used for medicine, which areas they avoided. They became ghosts that struck from nowhere and vanished into the green darkness. The commander on 442B was named the Younger, nephew of the fleet commander who had died at Mars. He had been given this assignment to prove himself worthy of his family name. Instead, he was losing soldiers every day to an enemy he could not find. "They are animals," he told his officers. "They fight without honor, without rules. They should have died in the first week." "They adapt faster than any species we have encountered," his tactical advisor said carefully. "Perhaps we should request reinforcements." "No," 4 hands clenched with anger. "I will not admit defeat to these creatures. Burn the jungle, burn it all. We will drive them out." The fires started the next day. Ships dropped incendiary bombs across thousands of square kilometers. The purple and red trees became walls of flame. Animals screamed and died. The air filled with smoke and ash. Watched from the mouth of a cave her squad had discovered, the jungle she had learned to use was dying. Her advantages were burning away. "What do we do now, Sergeant?" asked. His face was covered in soot and sweat. He looked like he had aged 10 years in 3 weeks. Thought about her options. Surrender meant death or worse. Retreat was impossible without ships. The only choice left was to attack. "If they want to burn the jungle, we let them," she said slowly. "But we're not in the jungle anymore." "Where are we?" Smiled. It was not a friendly expression. "We're in their base, or we will be." The assault on the command center was suicide by any reasonable measure. 23 humans against over 1,000 aliens, attacking a fortified position with heavy weapons and shield generators. No sane commander would have approved it, but was not asking for approval. They approached through the tunnels that ran beneath the base. The original inhabitants of 442B had built them millions of years ago, before their extinction. They had never bothered to explore them. They thought they were empty. "Charges set," Corporal reported. He was the squad's demolitions expert, a quiet man who had once worked in construction. Now he built things that destroyed. Nodded on my signal. They emerged inside the base itself, in a storage area filled with ammunition and fuel. The guards never expected an attack from below. They died before they could raise an alarm. "Move fast," ordered. "We have maybe 5 minutes before they realize what's happening." 5 minutes became 15. The humans moved through the base like a disease, striking at critical points and vanishing before the response could arrive. Communications went down first, then the shield generators, then the armory. The Younger was in his command center when the explosion hit. The entire building shook. Alarms screamed. Reports came in from all directions, each one worse than the last. "How many attackers?" he demanded. "Unknown, Commander. They appear to be everywhere at once." "Impossible. Find them, kill them." But by the time his soldiers organized a response, the humans were already gone. They had slipped back into the tunnels, leaving behind a base in ruins. Power systems destroyed, supplies burning, over 100 soldiers dead. Stood in the wreckage and finally understood what his uncle had faced. These humans did not fight like other species. They did not follow the rules of war that they had learned over thousands of years of conquest. They improvised. They adapted. They refused to accept that they were beaten. "Request reinforcements," he said quietly. The words tasted like poison in his mouth. "Tell command that we need assistance." The message reached the 2 days later. It was not the only such message. Across their empire, similar reports were coming in. Human attacks on supply lines, human raids on military outposts, human ships appearing where they should not be, destroying targets and vanishing before any response could arrive. The Grand Council of the Empire met in emergency session. They had never faced a war like this. Their previous conquests had been clean, efficient, quick. This was dirty, chaotic, endless. "We must commit more forces," General the Elder argued. He had taken command after his brother's death at Mars. "Crush them with overwhelming numbers." "We are already committing half our military to this single war," another counselor pointed out. "Our other territories are becoming unstable. The species we conquered are watching what the humans are doing. Some are beginning to whisper about resistance. Then we crush them too. With what forces? We cannot fight everywhere at once." The argument continued for hours. For the first time in their history, they faced a choice they had never imagined: win completely or face a war that might never end. Back on 442B, and her surviving soldiers held their position in the caves. They had lost 6 more people in the assault, but they had hurt the enemy badly, and more importantly, they had sent a message. "Reinforcements are coming," she told her squad. "Our ships broke through the blockade. They'll be here in 2 weeks. Looked around at the tired, wounded, hungry soldiers around him. "Can we hold that long?" Put a hand on his shoulder. "We held for 3 weeks with no hope at all. Now we have hope. We can hold forever." The relief force arrived 12 days later. When they found squad, they expected to find broken survivors barely clinging to life. Instead, they found soldiers who had claimed an entire mountain range as their territory, who had turned captured weapons against their former owners, who had made themselves so dangerous that the enemy had stopped even trying to attack them. The commander of the relief force, Colonel, had fought in dozens of battles. She had seen courage and determination across the galaxy. But what she saw on 442B made her voice catch in her throat. "How did you do this?" she asked. "You were outnumbered 50 to 1. His answer became legend among human forces. It spread from ship to ship, base to base, planet to planet. It became a reminder of what humanity was capable of when pushed to the edge. "We didn't know we were supposed to lose," she said simply, "so we just kept fighting." The war continued, but somewhere in the endless darkness of space, the balance had begun to shift. Humanity was no longer just surviving. Humanity was starting to win. 5 years had passed since the ultimatum. 5 years since they had demanded humanity's submission. 5 years since humans had given their answer. Now the war was coming to an end. Admiral stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, but the ship was not defending Earth anymore. It was positioned above leading a fleet that had traveled across the stars to deliver justice. The planet below was beautiful in a cold way. Purple oceans surrounded continents of black stone. Cities of dark metal spread across the surface, monuments to thousands of years of conquest and domination. This was where the Empire had been born. This was where it would die. "All ships reporting ready, Admiral," her first officer reported. Nodded slowly. She was older now, her hair showing streaks of gray. The war had aged her. It had aged everyone. But her eyes still held the same fire that had burned when she first refused to surrender. "Wait for my command," she said. "We do this right." Around her fleet, allied ships from a dozen species held formation. They had names that human tongues could barely pronounce. They had bodies of different shapes and sizes. They came from worlds that had conquered generations ago. They had all watched humanity's desperate stand against the Empire. They had seen the impossible become possible. One by one they had risen up. One by one they had joined the fight. The leader of the Allied coalition was a being called First Voice. Her species had been conquered so long ago that they barely remembered freedom. When she spoke too, Her translated words carried the weight of centuries of suffering. "My ancestors dreamed of this day," she said. "They died believing it would never come, that the empire was eternal, that resistance was meaningless." And now asked, "Now we stand above the heart of our oppressors. Now we show them that nothing is eternal, that resistance is never meaningless." Strange eyes glittered with emotion. "Your species taught us that, Admiral. When we saw you fight against impossible odds, when we saw you refuse to kneel, something changed in us. You reminded us that we had forgotten how to be free." Felt the weight of that moment. Humanity had not asked to inspire a galactic revolution. They had simply refused to surrender, and that refusal had echoed across the stars. General's voice came through the communication system. He was too old to command ships now, but he had insisted on being present for this moment. He sat in a special chair on the Indomitable, his white hair and weathered face a reminder of everything humanity had survived. "The ground forces are in position," he reported. "We can begin whenever you're ready." "What about their defenses?" "Broken. Their orbital platforms were destroyed in the first wave. Their fleet is scattered across 100 systems, too far away to help. The planet itself has some ground-based weapons, but nothing we can't handle." Looked at the planet below. 3 billion lived there. Soldiers and civilians, warriors and children. For a moment she thought about all the suffering they had caused, all the species they had enslaved, all the worlds they had burned. It would be easy to do the same to them, to burn their cities and shatter their civilization, to show them exactly what they had done to others. But that was not why humanity had fought. "Open a channel to the surface," she ordered. "All frequencies." The communication officer worked quickly. "Channel open, Admiral. They can hear you." Straightened her uniform and spoke. Her words were broadcast into every home and building and shelter. "This is Admiral of the United Earth Fleet. 5 years ago, your leaders demanded our submission. They threatened to destroy our species if we refused. They expected us to kneel." She paused, letting the words sink in. "We did not kneel. We fought. And now we are here, above your world, with the power to do to you what you plan to do to us." On the surface, billions looked up at the sky filled with enemy ships. Fear spread through the cities. This was the end they had always given to others. This was the fate they had dealt to 17 species. Now it had come for them. "But we are not here for revenge," continued. "We are here to end this war, to stop the cycle of conquest and domination that your empire has followed for thousands of years. We are here to offer you a choice." In the council chambers, the surviving leaders listened with growing disbelief. The humans had won. They held all the power, and yet they were offering a choice. "Surrender," said. "Disarm your military. Release all conquered peoples. Allow the species you have enslaved to determine their own futures. Do this and your people will live. Your culture will survive. Your children will have futures. But if you choose to fight, if you force us to invade your world, we will win. You know this. You have seen what we are capable of when we are pushed. Do not make us push harder. Do not make us do things that will haunt us forever." The council chamber erupted in argument. Some leaders demanded continued resistance, cursing the humans with ancient words of hatred. Others spoke of the practical reality. Their fleet was gone. Their allies had betrayed them. There was surrounded. And behind all of it was the question none of them wanted to ask. How had this happened? How had a primitive species from a single planet defeated the greatest empire in the galaxy? Elder, the oldest surviving member of the council, finally spoke. He had ruled for centuries. He had seen the empire at its height. Now he was watching it fall. "We taught them," he said quietly. "Every species we conquered, we forced to learn our ways, to become efficient, to become ruthless. But the humans learned something different. They learned that they would rather die than submit, and that made them stronger than us." "Then what do you suggest?" another demanded. looked at the sky filled with enemy ships. He thought about all the species the Empire had crushed, all the resistance movements they had destroyed, all the hope they had stamped out. The humans had proven that hope could not be stamped out, that it would always find a way to rise again. "We surrender," he said. "We accept their terms, because they are offering us something we never offered anyone else, a chance to survive." The vote was not unanimous. Nothing ever was, but enough council members agreed. The broadcast went out, and the Empire formally surrendered to humanity and its allies. President arrived on the surface 3 days later. She was no longer the young leader who had given the order to resist. She was 43 now, tested by years of war, hardened by loss. But when she spoke to the galaxy, her voice still carried the same determination. "You demanded our submission," she said, looking at the assembled leaders. "You offered us slavery or extinction. We chose a third option. We chose to fight, not because we love war, but because we love freedom more." She walked among them, this small human surrounded by creatures twice her size. "You asked what humanity is capable of when threatened. Now you know. We will fight until our last breath. We will sacrifice everything to remain free. We will never, ever surrender. But we are not monsters. We do not want to rule your empire or enslave your people. We want to build something better. A galaxy where no species has to face the choice we faced. Where freedom is not something you fight for, but something you are born with." The terms of surrender were harsh but fair. The military was disbanded. Their conquered territories were released. The species they had enslaved were given full independence and resources to rebuild their worlds. And humanity took on a new role, not as conquerors, not as rulers, but as guardians. They built a coalition of free species dedicated to ensuring that no empire would ever again threaten galactic peace. 5 years after that, Admiral retired. She spent her final years on Mars, in the colony she had saved during the darkest days of the war. Sometimes she would look up at the stars and remember all the friends she had lost. Countless others whose names filled the memorial walls. General passed away peacefully in his sleep, 2 years after the war ended. His funeral was attended by representatives from 100 species, all paying tribute to the old soldier who had helped plan humanity's impossible victory. Doctor continued her work, developing new technologies that improved life across the galaxy. Her shields protected ships of every species. Her innovations powered hospitals and schools and homes. She never forgot that her work had begun with weapons, but she made sure it ended with healing. Sergeant became the most decorated soldier in human history. She could have had any position she wanted. Instead, she chose to teach. She trained the next generation of soldiers, passing on everything she had learned about survival, adaptation, and the refusal to give up. On Luna Base, where Doctor's team had worked through those desperate first nights, a memorial was built. It listed every human who had died in the war. Over 12 million names, covering walls that stretched for kilometers. At the entrance, a simple plaque carried words that had become humanity's legacy to the stars. "They told us to kneel, we taught them to fear." But below that, in smaller letters, was another message. It was added years later, when the wounds of war had begun to heal, when humanity had started to think about what they wanted their legacy to truly be. "Fear is not our gift to the galaxy. Freedom is. We fought so that no one would ever have to fight alone again. We bled so that future generations might live in peace. We did not ask to become warriors, but when we had to fight, we showed the universe what we are made of. We are human, we are stubborn, we are creative. We are terrifying when threatened and generous when we are not. We make mistakes and we learn from them. We fall and we get up again. And we never, ever give up." The stars no longer seemed dark to humanity. They seemed full of possibility, full of friends waiting to be made and worlds waiting to be explored. The war was over. The future had begun. And somewhere in that vast galaxy, on countless worlds, in countless languages, species told their children the story of the small planet that refused to surrender, the story of the impossible war, the story of humanity. It was a good story, and it was only the beginning.